Oh my gosh, we're doing it. I am here on the Hoard of Tales Twitch channel with some amazing fans and also just like people in general that were asked to be part of a panel about improv acting and TTRPGs. So let's go around and just introduce ourselves. I have with me the amazing Anna. Go ahead, introduce yourself. Where can we find you? What you do, and your tabletop RPG experience, improv and theater experience.
Yeah, so my name is Anna. I'm known as La Leon Cosplay on Instagram or La Leon Photo on Twitter. Currently, I don't have a terribly interesting job, so I won't talk about that. But I've been doing role-playing games for about 11 years now, and I've been DMing for 2 years. I started out with Firefly RPG, and I adored it. And then I also do Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. For my theater experience, I have been in community theater and all different other kinds for about 20, 21 years now. So yeah, it's me.
Okay, yeah, that's really amazing. Okay, and next we have the tremendous Philippa. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, me. Hi, I'm Philippa Mort. You can find me on Twitter at Mort Philippa, where I post up stuff about writing TTRPG games and supplements. I'm on Itch.io as well. I also do a bit of fantasy art as well. Yeah, I play a lot of D&D, but I also play a lot of other games, mostly powered by the apocalypse, and also one-page games like Honey Heist, Lasers and Feelings, things like that. Including Glitter Hearts, which I'll be playing next week as part of range of streams. And then improv, I've been part of a sci-fi and fantasy improv troupe that does long form shows, so like an hour-long show for the last, that one about 4 years, and then I've been doing improv for about 5 years, I think, in total since I joined university, which shows my age. And yeah, so I try and meld the two quite a lot as well, and bring a lot of improv into my games, which we're going to talk about. And that's me.
Beautiful. Okay. And the fantastic Jenna. Go ahead.
Hey, I'm Jenna. You can find me on Twitter at PhiloJenny. It's probably spelled out because it's like a weird spelling, but that hints to my background as actually I'm a plant ecologist, not necessarily theater or performance based mainly, but theater, performance, improv, TTRPG is the way that I like to express myself creatively. So I've been in that scene, you could say, for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now. I've been doing theatrical performance for about 20 years, off and on, in a academic context and also like an educational performance context. And I've had about 3 years of improv training, so both short form and long form game-based improv. And same thing, I love bringing improv into TTRPG. I think it's really fun to explore relationships and characters and dynamics with performance. It's a great way to express yourself, and it's fun. Yeah.
Absolutely, it is.
Back to you, Lexi.
And more at 8. No, so my name is Lexi. I am at the Black, or not the Black Girl Mage, but at Black Girl Mage on Twitter. I am a tabletop role-playing game kind of person. I really like D&D. I've been running D&D 5e for about, I said 3 years last stream. It's actually, I just found out today it's been like 2.5, so it's 2.5. But I have a background in musical theater and theater in general. I just started doing improv. I was telling them this. I started my improv career in quarantine. So I started improv with the comedy group, and we just did all of our games and all of our learning through Zoom, which is very interesting. So way less training, but I'm very excited to learn from all of these beautiful ladies as we kind of debunk and go through and debrief and all of the words about improv and how we can bring improv training to tabletop RPGs in all senses. So to start, just wanted to say as well, we will be looking at, we have our own questions, but we also will be looking at questions from chat too. So if you're in chat, you can definitely ask some questions, we'll answer them. So first, I feel like this is the most, like, this is the first thing you should do anytime you're talking about improv. We should just talk about what the principles of improv are, why they're so important, what they mean to us. So I don't know, what are the basic structures that bring improv together, I guess, if that makes sense.
We were kind of touching on it before, but I think the most fundamental thing, even if you have never watched an improv show or been in an improv space, I feel like everyone probably knows the idea of yes and. It's a basic improv principle. I mean, I won't define it for everyone because it kind of is different for everyone, but I see it as saying yes to the premise of the performance. So if someone says, "Welcome to my dungeon," you say, "Okay, yes, we're in a dungeon now. Let's play in this space," rather than saying, "Oh, we're not in a dungeon, we're in an airport," etc. And the "and" part is that you accept the premise and that you add something to it. So if someone says, "Welcome to my dungeon," you say, "Oh, yes, there's skeletons all over the walls." So you've accepted you're in a dungeon and you've added something to it. That seems to be kind of pretty universal, but I don't know, Philippa, Anna, Lexi, you might have more nuance to your to how you use it in your performances.
Yeah, the way I see it is that you don't deny your partner's existence. So you can absolutely say, yes, okay, we're in a dungeon, and explore that dungeon. And then you say, oh, well, what happens if we leave the dungeon? And you just go off of whatever they said and go from there. And I'm very much of the same mind as you for the yes and idea. So they have their own world that they have started to build, and you can build off of that as well. And you can have your own perception of what that is and play off of it.
Philippa, do you?
Honestly, I don't have a huge amount to add to that. That sums it up really well. I do have a fun example that we use in our local games when we're explaining this. Is like, it can be super funny in the moment to be like, no, that's not what's happening, because it's like, oh, quick joke. So for example, if someone's like, I have a gun, and then you're like, that's not a gun, it's a banana, you'd be like, huh, that's funny. But now you've just made that other person look like an absolute weirdo who doesn't know what's going on, and they now have to explain why they have a banana but they thought it was a gun. So like, that's, I think, yeah, what you're saying is like, how I imagine it is like, you're carrying on the justification of what's happening, and like you're all working together. So like, that's the other bit about improv I think is useful to bring into games, and we'll talk about this more, is like, you're working as a team, you're not like saying no to others' ideas, you're all agreeing and like working together on your ideas to have a good time. And that happens in the improv comedy and improv in games. So
Absolutely.
I think, that's like a big part of it, is that like you're supporting your team. Like at the end of the day, improv is like, can improv be done by only one person on a stage? Yeah, absolutely. But when you're working on a scene where there's multiple people, the whole goal is to uplift and like carry your teammates along with you. So as everyone said before, yes is an agreement, and the and is where you're going to jump off and build something, which is a perfect example of that. That is also how I describe yes and. I think improv is very interesting because improv by itself, it's not always supposed to be about what is the most funny thing. It's supposed to be, what builds the scene. So I guess that something that I want to ask, how do you use improv and your performance skills in general to build in your tabletop RPG worlds, whether it's D&D, whether it's like Honey Heist, whether it's Good or Hurt, anything? How do you use that yes and to build up your scenes and the feeling and tone and theme and of your games? Go for it.
I have a good example to start. So like a lot of what I do, I tend to use more of it in the stuff that's powered by the apocalypse game, so stuff that has moves that then have a mixed success, because there's so much room for that to then be like, what happens here? Yes, this happens. And so what I'll do is, and you can do this in D&D and things as well, is that I'll incorporate improv by asking my players, like, okay, who, do you know the bartender? How do you know them? And like invite them to start inventing ideas as well and taking that like on board a lot. So that's a big way I use improv in my games, is just sort of opening up, rather than me being like, no, I'm the GM and I have complete control of what is happening here and I have pre-planned everything. I'm like, no, throw me some stuff. Tell me about the person sitting next to you in your class when you're playing, you know, a high school game, or tell me what this pub is called. And then, okay, you gave it a weird name. Now I'm going to think of some weird backstory lore to incorporate later. So that's a big way I use it in my games. But yeah, how does everyone else use it?
Yeah, so for me, with my theater background, I am not the best at improv games. I fully admit that, but when I've improved on stage, I always have pulled the script in to my improvisation when I need to correct mistakes and whatnot. And so I kind of pulled that same idea into my DMing. So for example, I will have 5 or 6 potential directions that things could go, and maybe it doesn't end up quite being that way, the way I envisioned it, depending on what my players do. And so I will leave it open to whatever role playing they want to do, whatever actions they want to take, and then I can based off of that kind of script that I have, the bare bones, I can lead it in the direction that they want to take it. So that's how I incorporate improv for myself.
Yeah, I think because I'm less often a DM or GM and I'm more often a player, I don't incorporate it necessarily into leading a game. But there's a concept that I picked up in my training. It's called like improv heaven. And it's the idea that you might have the best, funniest, most interesting idea for a scene, and if you jump in and someone has already said, we're in a soda shop, and you were like, but my scene needed to happen in a volcano, you can send that idea up to improv heaven and you can wish it well, and you know that it will be hilarious and funny up there, and maybe you can bring it back, but right now you're playing in a soda shop. So supporting people, I mean, that's the whole yes and thing, but when you are actually playing it and to build on that, agreeing with the players, it can sometimes be hard if you're planning a heist or you're interacting with an NPC. Mm-hmm. The other players might not do that in a way that you wanted to, because you have this great hilarious idea over here. Just sending it off to improv heaven and being like, okay, we're playing in this space now, so you have proposed this soda shop. What's something funny I could add to this soda shop? Well, what if there's, you know, a milkshake fountain in the corner or whatever? And just being okay with sending your ideas off and helping your partner in the moment, or your group in the moment.
That is so priceless. Like, I'm literally learning that right now, that I have to like right now with my DMing, I have learned I might have these these really looming plot lines, and I'm like, oh, this villain's gonna, you know, knock their socks off or whatever. But then the second, like, I have to send some of those ideas to improv heaven and think of, what are the stakes in this scene? What do they actually care about? And sorry, but like, how can I rip that away from them? That's like literally, that's like what it is. It's not, they don't know or care about the villain that I have looming out in the distance.
Yeah.
It's about them and their scene and where they're at right now, and how I can take the scene and put it on its head without it being, like Philippa said earlier, like, it might be funny or shocking to be like, oh, I have a gun. No, you have a Tyrannosaurus Rex in your hands. Like, what are you doing? You know, it's like, it can be shocking to do that. But like, it's about being in the moment and listening to them and then figuring out how to raise the stakes. Like, that is so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's also kind of like, I've seen a lot of people being like, oh, I hate the person who says, this is what my character would do, and then they do something that actually stops everyone else from having fun. And so it's sort of like you can incorporate it by thinking about, well, what will my character do that still furthers the fun for everyone, still furthers the game narrative for everyone. I'm using fun to sort of talk about like the entertainment of playing a game, not necessarily a funny game. But yeah, I feel like that fits in with what Jenna's saying, like as a character, like when you're playing as well, yeah, is sort of leaning into playing together is a really useful skill, and being flexible is a useful skill to pick up.
I think go ahead. No, you're good.
No. So I think another really good example of this in games that I've DM'd, I've done Sunless Citadel twice now with very different groups. And I won't spoil anything if people haven't played it yet, but the second time through, I accidentally made a character they met extremely lovable. And it turned out they wanted to take this character on their adventure with them to the point that they were like trying to take them out of the Sunless Citadel with them. And I had to go along with it, being like, okay, what would this character do now? How can I incorporate this? And it was just so fascinating to me, just like doing slightly different characterizations, how the different players reacted.
Oh my gosh, I feel like so I think like one way that I've used improv in like my games more recently has been I've listened to a lot of comedy podcasts, like comedy tabletop game podcasts. And so I've really started to I've grown to like when people are just like sitting there like, why are you crying, like why is that bartender crying, and you have to like come up with like randomly like or you're talking to like a villain and they're like, why'd you just fart, and you just have to like go with like come up with the reason why. Like I don't know why, but that kind of stuff like it makes it sets a tone that I want out of a lot of my games, but then also it just like keeps me on my toes. It makes each scene a live improv game. But I think one of the ways that I've seen this like on the internet too, I remember seeing this post, it was a tweet, I think, and it was this person that said that the way that they keep they like let their players engage in the game in a way that keeps them on their toes, was that they let their players say, I know a guy. And like, if they say, I know a guy, then they have to come up with like 3 details, I think it was, for the person. And like, then it's up to the DM on whether or not that person, like they can come up with a whole spanning backstory for this person or not, but it is up to the DM on whether or not that person will like trust them, will actually give them information and stuff. The player can make up anything. The player can say it's their mom, the player can say it's their buddy from war, or that's their best friend, like their best friend's dragon or whatever, and then establish a relationship, and that person fully exists in the world. And now it's the GM's job to make that connection seem realistic and to also make the decision of whether or not they're gonna, fulfill what the players want them to fulfill. But I feel like that's a very interesting interactive way of like letting your players, as someone who DMs more than she plays, I'm like the opposite of Jenna, but like I feel like that's a good way to keep me on my feet with improv rather than it being the other way around, where it's just like everything I say is evergreen and you don't know anybody and all of your connections have been laid out before this and you're not allowed to make up anything. Like that's not very fun.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
I think also like well, we'll talk about this probably more. There's another panel coming up for engaging new players, but I've noticed the more people play something like D&D, which is more like Dungeon Master focus, the less they'll try and add in extra stuff. Whereas I found newer players will be like I had my friend was playing the first time the other day and she was like, is there a cauldron over there? I want to do a cool thing with a cauldron. And I was like, yeah, of course there's a cauldron. Like, you want to do a cool thing? Tell me what you want to do. So I feel like bringing that back can be quite fun. And it depends on the system, but some systems I feel encourage it more than others. So yeah, like encouraging it back in, like you're saying, Lexi, like getting people to try new stuff, I think is super fun because it adds that variability.
Yeah. So we just kind of talked about like how we use improv when it comes to DMing, and then Jenna, you talked about being a player in improv. On the flip side, why don't we flip to Jenna's form of the question? How being a player, like how can you do improv, whether so there's a person in chat, I'm Baker83, that says new players are the best. I agree. I love when players come to my table and they're like, is there something I can backflip off of? I'm like, yep, do it. Go for it. Please. Oh my gosh, please do it. Because I love that newfound, like, oh, I can do this in D&D, and like people start realizing, yeah, there are boundaries and maybe there are consequences to your actions, but there are so many things you can do. And that phase is prime for a lot of players before they kind of get set in their ways of like, I'm not doing anything new. I already know I have my sheet set up and I'm going off my sheet. So like, how can players use improv to liven up their sessions, to make their fellow players feel more listened to, or even just have fun in the tavern,
One of my favorite tools, and I'm actually not stealing it, but I'm giving props to actually, I think someone who's in the chat right now. One of my GMs had introduced me to the idea of character adjectives. It's kind of like the attributes, like the I know a guy thing, but you set up descriptive adjectives for your player, and you can keep it simple, keep it to like 3. And I find that before you go into a scene, all you have to do is glance down at your adjectives, and it makes it a million times easier to know how you will react in the scene. So if your character is a bit naive and lazy, but creative, and a seedy character at the bar tries to steal money from you or something, like you would know how you would do the laziest but most creative thing. And similarly,
very naively.
Very naively. So maybe you're naive enough to get into the situation where you're getting robbed, but you have a creative, lazy situation to get out of it or something. And also just keeping in mind, like, motivation is such a stereotypical thing to talk about when you're talking about performance. But if you're going into a scene and you know what your character, who they are, then you can start thinking, okay, well, how do they feel in this moment? Are they scared? Are they excited? How do they feel about this person? Do they hate this person? Do they want to help this person? And what do they want out of this engagement? Do they just want to get out of here as fast as possible? Do they want to stay and learn more? And if you kind of set up those little breadcrumbs, it gives you a little framework so you can get into a scene, and even though you're improvising, you've got these little touchstones along the way to kind of help you. So if you're running out of ideas, you could be like, what do I say to this person? Well, I don't like this person and I'm lazy, so maybe I'll just like shrug my shoulders and pass it back to the next person. Like that was a lot of stuff to kind of throw out there, but that's how I kind of play with all the little improv tools when I'm in a scene.
That makes me
think really like that. Sorry, no, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, that makes me think of a similar thing we do in my improv stuff that I bring into games as well, which is basically the same thing, but we call it like a motto or a mantra. So like you have a one-word sentence that you stick with, and you just keep repeating that in your head. So for example, like, I really want ice cream, and so like your whole thing is like, I want ice cream. So in a game setting, you might have a quest or something. Or I really like in D&D, they have that section on backgrounds, don't they? And you have like your bond, your flaw, your ideal, and I feel like those are super fun to use as those, and just like keep remembering those. So similar to you were saying, Jenna, like write it down. If you write those down as well, and just keep thinking like, okay, if I go back to that, what would I do right now?
Yeah.
So that's how I use that sort of thing as well.
I'll try. I love that. Yeah.
And one thing that I do, especially when I'm getting into a new game, if it's not just like a one shot, I will sit down with my character sheet and I will write out a couple of ideas of scenarios. And then I'm a bit of a writer, and so I'll actually sit down and write out what in this scenario my character would do. And I create an entire story about how she would react to meeting a stranger in a bar and needing to go save, I don't know, a cat in a tree.
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
So I'll build a couple of these different scenes, and it doesn't have to be long. It can be like a page long, but it really gives me a greater understanding of the character and what their drive is and what really interests them and what gets them to do any number of things. And then that leads into actually acting the character more in the actual game.
That is so cool. That is a really cool idea.
That's
I don't know
like
if you guys have noticed, I've been like writing down. I'm like, motivation, create one sentence mantra. I'm just like, it's so funny. So Jenna, you described something that I have had to start like doing, like when I create NPCs, and like obviously we're talking about the player side. So I also would do this for my like characters that I play as. I don't do it as often as I used to, but anytime I felt like we were walking into a new situation, in my improv classes, we learned something called crow, which is like, it's like the bird crow, character, relationship, object, and then wants, which is everything that you hit. It's like, it establishes everything. Who are you? What do you want? And what is your relationship with the people around you? And what is the relationship? And like, that's kind of what you're trying to establish, even if you're just doing like three sentence scenes, is like, who am I and who am I in relation to who I'm doing this scene with? What do I want? And so I feel like that's really interesting that you just like hit all of that. The sentences thing, the one sentence mantra, and then writing out like how your character would react. I feel like that would help so much for players who, I think, if you're worried about role playing, like I know some people who are like little bit on the hesitant side when it comes to role playing, because it requires coming up with something really fast and on the spot, right? And for a lot of people, that's hard. Like, yeah, there's so many people on Twitch, on YouTube that are like professional and effort. It seems so effortless, right? But I think everyone has to start somewhere. So I feel like doing the one sentence mantra or doing the like writing out simple situations like, oh, if they're in a tavern, what drink are they getting? How are they going to respond to someone like accusing them for stealing something? Or how are they going to respond to someone asking them for help? Like all of those kind of things can help you form your character and also feel way less on the spot when you get to the table to play.
And I think too, it's also everyone wants to be, like myself included, just like no script, like just off the cuff, totally witty, creative solutions, and have an answer for every single situation that comes up. But it's hard, like, and I think one thing to keep in mind is that it's totally okay to break character, take a step back, and talk about it. And I find that talking it through and actually going through those different things can help launch you into more organic scenes. So you're faced with a situation and you go, oh my God, I don't know how to react. You can step back and say, okay, I'm not sure how my character would react, but they are happy to see this person, but they want to get out of here quickly. And they're kind of self-centered. So, okay, I think the next best thing would be for them to politely greet this person and then go straight to the bar or whatever. And just talking through, touching back on those things, then you get a launching point and now you're not coming up with a reaction on the fly, you're just playing through that reaction because it's motivated by stuff you already know about your character. So it's totally fine to just take a step back and like pause, think about it. You don't have to come up with a one-act play all on your own.
I literally, like, when I'm playing, I'll be like, blah, 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 in character. So out of character, blah, blah, and then I'll back in character. And I literally move as well. I feel like that's super useful to like incorporate movement as well. If your character is like, does your character lead with their head because they're very smart? Do they lead with their chest because they're confident? Like if you start kind of like putting yourself into the character a bit more, it can feel a little bit easier. I think there's a question similar to that in the chat that's popped up, in fact,
So
helping people.
Yeah, the question was from Elise Moon. How do you guys tend to support your players if they have trouble going along with improv? Which is essentially, that's kind of like we're answering it here. Anna, did you have anything that you do to help players or even help yourself, like when it comes to improv?
So that is always the challenge. I know that, like I said, I struggle with improv sometimes, and so it's important to to talk it out with the players, like even like you were saying, to break out of character, to say, okay, so where are we in the scene right now? What direction are we going in? Like if they've lost the train of thought of where things are going to happen. And so that can kind of trigger an idea. Another thing that one of my players does, which is just wild to me, is that he will roll a d20 to see what his character does. So if he doesn't know what he's going to do, he will literally just roll a d20. And if he doesn't roll the way he was expecting, it goes completely different than the way he was going to act. And it gets very interesting when he does that.
Yeah. I will say that that is something that I do as well, both player side and DM side. I will think of the two or maybe three, but two ways that I could react. And it's like off the top of my mind. Like, to be honest, I don't even think about the character first, and I probably shouldn't. But for me, I think, okay, I could either lie or I could tell the truth. And then I roll a d20, and then whatever, if it's like 10 and above, then I'm like, okay, I'm telling the truth, right? But then I start thinking of, okay, well, how would this person tell the truth? Like, are they going to tell the full truth, or are they going to tell half truth? Whatever. Whereas if it's 9 and below, it's like they're lying straight up, and I get to have fun lying to my players. Like, it's very fun. But I think that something that's important is also that you have to we have to acknowledge as well that improv, it is very fun, but it is something that we like to do. Not every single D&D game is going to be improv heavy. Like, you have some DMs that you will show up to their table and your character sheet is God. Like, let me just say, like, that's it. It's like you have a charisma stat of this, you have a this stat of this. I'm not going to ask, we're not going to even like have sessions where we talk. Like, it's all just out of character. My player moves over here and then we're going to do this and this. So improv is very fun, and it adds a very fun layer to your games. But also at the same time, you don't have to do improv all the time. It can be very practical and be out of character and just say, like, didn't we learn this about this person, rather than being in character and be like, oh, well, like, trying to come up with something on the spot.
Yeah,
I think there you go. There you go.
Just to circle back around to that idea, and also to link it to supporting players, if you have someone who's not necessarily comfortable with improvising or acting or being vulnerable like that, because it is a quite vulnerable thing, asking questions in that sort of out of character way can also help that. So even if the player doesn't want to play in the scene, you could say, well, how does your character feel about this person? Do they know this person? Do they know of this person? Are they happy, sad, whatever? And asking an open-ended question, you can get a response from the player rather, and you can use that to add to the flavor of the scene and keep it going without forcing them to like play with me in this game space that you're not comfortable in. And sorry, go ahead, Philippa.
I was just going to add to that, because like I think Elsa Moon's question is really good, because you can also interpret it as like trouble going along with improv might be someone doesn't really want to do improv, they want it to be a bit more planned. And I think you can kind of assuage people's worries about that by, like, as you say, kind of stepping out to the side for a minute instead of being like, well, this is my thought process. If you're saying it as a DM, someone said, are we talking about as a player or a DM? We're kind of talking about both. But if you're being the DM in that moment, you can be like, okay, well, to make this narratively interesting, I'm going to do this. And sort of, I think sometimes stepping back from it, because we're not performing, we're playing in a game. Like, I think that is actually super useful. Like, that's a big distinction here, is we're coming from performing, where you don't stop the scene. But in games, it's always fine to be like, hang on, pause for a sec, like, what are we actually doing? Like, let's, make sure we all know what's going on. And I think that can be a way to make someone feel a bit more comfortable if you are adding a bit more like spontaneity and improv into a game, is to, as you say, Jenna, like, ask questions and do it gently, and ask leading questions to make people more calm again.
Yeah, and then also another thing that you can do is, when appropriate, if they're struggling to figure out what to do, if you can, have them roll some kind of check and make it so that their character discovers something new about the scene, and then they can play off of that, hopefully. but it gives them a little bit more information to work off of.
Yeah. I do think that a lot of the times introducing more information into a scene, and like not an overflow of information, but introducing new information into a scene can make a player feel like, I know I feel a bit more comforted when I'm sitting there thinking like, what would I say? And then the DM's like, also you like, or like roll a perception check or roll this, and then I learned something new, like, oh, well, in the corner you see your friend who, she's been dealing with this. So, and it might be, it's pertinent to what I'm, getting. I guess I'm being very vague about the situation, but like, if I was in a situation where I was like interrogating someone and I'm sitting there, my brain is just static because I'm like, I don't know what my character would say I don't know. It always helps to have the DM back up and be like, hey, it's okay, here's some information. Then you can make your next step. And I think also taking the step back, and don't be afraid to like toss it around to your friends and be like, I'm gonna do this. Like that idea is very fun, to be like, guys, I'm gonna be a little interesting here. I think I'm gonna ask him to do this, or I think I'm gonna steal something from him, or I think I'm gonna, I'm gonna stab the bard. I don't know. Like it could be anything. But just note that if you're trying to run, or if you're playing an improv heavy game or running an improv heavy game, like you really do have to treat everyone like a team and not let it be, this character, this person is on their own, and the things that they say makes them feel like singled out. So you shouldn't be afraid to propose it to everyone,
It's making me think of another thing that I think most improv groups will use, which I've just literally in this moment realized the name is a bit weird because it probably was made up by an old white guy, but it's called like pimping your partner, which is when you like set someone else up for a joke. So instead of you taking the joke, you'll do something which then makes them be able to play off that for something funny. So let's call it setting it up instead of what it was called. But that's kind of what you're saying, Lexi, is like, like give people more stuff for them to build off of and do that yes and, rather than leaving someone like, I'm still gonna know what to do. Like just give them more things to jump off of. Set them up to have more fun.
So let's like, okay, so let's kind of transition into first of all, like how can the average player or anyone who's never taken an improv class, never done any like long form training, short form training, like I'm very much like a 3-sentence scene kind of gal. I like those, or minute long scene kind of gal. How can the average player use improv and performance skills during their games without needing? What does that look like? Is this what we just answered, would you say? Or I feel like it's similar.
We kind of touched on the tools like using character adjectives, checking in with character emotion or motivation rather, and dynamics and stuff.
But I feel like there's ways you could practice maybe. So for example, something I do when I am bored is I try and think of a new character every 30 seconds and I try and play that character 30 seconds, do a new one. So obviously not like a character in a sort of RPG sense, but isn't just like a general character. So like if you're thinking you want to incorporate more character work and like more theatre acting-y type stuff, set a timer in your room by yourself, practice some characters, that can be fun. Or like find a load of those roll table like random lists of stuff and just have fun making a little mind map of an idea, just saying yes and with yourself. So it's like, yes, I will do this, and I will do this, and I will do this, and see what happens at the end of it. So, for example, I think the D&D Twitch, they do Design Dash, where they design an adventure in 15 minutes. Like, I sometimes play along with that at home sort of thing. And that's a super good way to practice just saying yes to an idea, because you only have 15 minutes. So just doing little stuff like that by yourself can help you practice, and then you'll feel a bit more confident to try it like with your friends. Yeah. Any other suggestions of stuff like that maybe?
So sometimes like when I've prepped for more formal performances, but it's also good for practicing for improv stuff, you can just open up like lists of character traits or different types of characters or adjectives, and you can have a very mundane sentence, and you can just practice how you would say that sentence if you were angry or scared or hiding something or etc. And it's kind of just a muscle that you exercise, and the more that you practice expanding, turning something very mundane into an emotional reaction, the easier it is when you're in a scene. Even if you as a player are not angry at the person, you've practiced, you know, an angry reaction to this thing, and you can suddenly turn something very mundane into something angry. Or if you have to transplant yourself into like a character who's very different from yourself, it just makes it a little easier. If it's kind of already practiced, you kind of expand your brain to incorporate those reactions and those emotions that you maybe don't necessarily always have in your everyday life.
Yeah. And one thing, especially for new players, I think, is a lot of times people feel like they need to be a character that is completely different from who they are as a person. And you don't have to do that. You can play yourself as a character in Glitter Hearts, in D&D, in Firefly, whatever. You don't have to go completely off of what you are as a person. And then especially as a first-time character, it can be really easy to say, okay, so this character is very similar to me, and so I can kind of get an idea of how they would react because it is very similar to how I would react. And you can start from there and then build off into other characters that are very different from you.
One I suggest is
great,
also play a TV character. Like I have played so many characters from She-Ra in one shots because all of them are such great fleshed out characters. Like why would I not want to? Like it's great. Like if you're getting stuck, just, you know, think of someone, you know, think of a TV character, you know, it's fine.
I was gonna say, go ahead, Jenna. Go ahead.
Oh, just I mean, I think sometimes people talk about, and I know some of you were on a panel about medieval tropes, but people talk about tropes as a negative thing sometimes. But embracing tropes can be a really great way if you don't know how to react in the moment, but you're maybe playing like a cool, like, I don't know, Clint Eastwood cowboy character or something. Like, you can embrace the trope. You can just be like, well, what would Clint Eastwood, I've never actually seen one of his cowboy movies, but he's like the stereotypical, like, cool cowboy guy. So, you know, just imagine that, and you can embody a trope that way, and it'll take some of the burden off of you.
That's like exactly what I was gonna say. Like, I feel like outside of the table, definitely doing these improv exercises, I wrote down two things. One, the tropes are so helpful. Like, I think where they get negative is stereotypes. Stereotypes are bad. Tropes are good. I feel like tropes help because you can lean into, oh, I'm gonna be the mom character. Like, I'm gonna be the kid genius. I'm gonna be the old hag, the hunched over old hag. I'm gonna be the jock that has no idea what's going on. Or even stuff like, I don't know, like, you can be even more vague than that and just be like, I'm a himbo. That's it. You know?
I mean, it worked on Sleeping City Dimension 20. That's basically what Sakayama was playing, so.
Exactly. You could be a himbo while being like, he's a firefighter. Sakayama's a firefighter himbo. You could be a halfling and be a himbo. You could be a half elf and be a himbo. Like, you can really embody that in so many different ways. And I think people have found that out and really leaned into that. So I will say, like, for me, I like to look up tropes in my downtime, and that's saying a lot about me as a person. But I like using them because then you can subvert them if you would like to. But a lot of times they can help, like archetypes can help you. Something that I also do is I have lists of, I do something very similar to, I think Jenna said this. It was either, well, I think both of you said.
Probably both.
Yeah, I think we've all said something very similar, but essentially like giving myself a limited amount of time, or even just having a conversation as a character and then flipping over to something completely opposite. And what I do, and I do this for when I make NPCs and stuff, which kind of helps, but I have a list of animals, I have a list of professions, and then I have a list of, I can't remember what the third category is, but a lot of the times I'll be like, okay, what would a hairstylist that buzzes like a bumblebee act like? And then I'm like coming up with like a, like, oh my God, you look so great today, like just doing all this kind of stuff. And then I'm like, okay, a garbage man that's like as big as a buffalo and he talks really slow. And it's like, yeah, I just got my job done. Like, I don't know,
Yeah.
like doing that kind of stuff is like, so it runs you through the, like, it helps you jump and do kind of like what Jenna said, like those emotions and those experiences that are not very prevalent every single day for you, especially if you work like 9 to 5 and stuff. Like, you get to really stretch your improv skills with that, and that takes nobody. Like, you don't have to have anybody else around you, and you might look a little crazy, so hopefully you don't have like roommates or anything, but it's been very helpful to me to like lean into those archetypes, and then also just using lists to help me come up with random stuff and exercise random characters.
Well, also, sorry, I'm going to change the subject, so go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Say something.
Okay, so one thing that I do that is kind of like that, but from a cosplayer's perspective, so obviously cosplayer, I will actually raid my cosplay closet and I create characters just out of random things. And so on the DM side, but it can also be player characters. I, for example, created a character using this wig, these ears, and just a bunch of stuff back home. And I built a character around what I put on me. And I figured out how she would act and what she would do. And she was very bubbly and cheerful. And, oh, hi, can I help you? And so I really like doing that every month or so, but sometimes I'll do a couple, like once a week or something. And I build characters out of just random things I put together from my closet.
And it's very interesting. These are all forms of like the same exercises. And I feel like the fact of the matter is just like bouncing around, exercise what you've got. It doesn't have to be long lists. It doesn't have to have animals in it. It doesn't have to have names or archetypes, but just challenging yourself to not just do one character and to recognize even, what things imply, like what implied that you were a bubbly character, what implies that you're making a dark edgy drow elf or whatever, like like what are the implications and how do you lean into that? I feel like that's really good. Philippa, did you have another question?
Yeah, I was going to pivot a little to talking about DMing planning, because what you said, Lexi, was really reminding me of, there's a great drawing, but basically to peel back the curtain of improv a little, there's also loads of these extra tools that we use, which are basically making plans ahead of time. So for example, structuring a story, there's a lot of ways that you can basically follow a story structure. So the hero's journey, but the one I was thinking of is like, there's sort of a trope around types of conflict in a story, and that there's basically only a certain number of those available. So like man against God, man against man against technology, man against nature, man against self, or person, whatever. There's this really cool drawing that shows this somewhere on the internet if you Google sort of man against self cartoon. But my point was that as a DM, you can use these tools the same way, where you can use like lists of characters, or you can think like, okay, story tropes and narrative tropes. You can lean into that, both planning ahead of time and in session. If you see something like, oh, this interaction here, maybe this later, something cool could happen. Right, okay, yes, and I'll write that down for later and plan that in, that this character's going to come back and do a cool scene, or like this guy's going to come back as the villain. Like, write it down, yes, and it to yourself, and be like, yes, okay, later I'm going to use this, and use this story sort of pattern that I know exists from watching movies and watching other people play, and like incorporate it into my own game. So basically give yourself those cheats and tools to help yourself sort of make it easier on yourself, is what I would suggest.
Yeah. When like planning stories and planning games, planning scenes, are there any other tools everyone else uses to kind of, I just am learning what you're saying, Philippa. I'm just now learning I'm like learning, oh, like I understand story structure. I have like a little bit of a screenwriting background, so I understand story structure, but like I'm just now realizing, oh, those NPCs can come back. Like I'm not just done with them. The players care about them, and I should bring them
Yeah.
back and like
Reincorporation, bring everything back.
yeah, I think one of the biggest ways I use it is just like I shut up. I literally just shut up as a DM. I let my players sit and talk to themselves, and they'll be like, "Ooh, maybe there's a huge lava
Yeah, and
monster
you're like,
over here," and then I'm like, "That was cooler than
that's
my
better than my idea.
yeah." I'm like, slowing it down, and then later on, it feels good for them to know what they said was either right, or I can take what they said and be like, it's not a lava monster, it's a monster made up of trash because my theme is like capitalism is the enemy. Like, like it could be anything, but they come up with better ideas than most of the time I do. So that's my way of yes anding and doing that. What about you, Jenna or Anna?
I'm trying to think of good examples. Like I know, yeah, I mean, I listen to a lot of performance and improv podcasts and like mix of, yeah, basically like people who, one is I'll just drop it, but it's Mission to Zix, and it's kind of that combination of structure and improv. So there's an overarching theme of where they want to steer the narrative, but then all the scenes within it are improvised, and they all do a really good job of remembering the smallest character that popped in for one scene, or the tiniest detail about the planet that they're visiting or something, and then bringing it back and actually fully exploring the implications. So if you're like, who's that guy over there? Oh, that's the jug salesman, and you're just trying to come up with something dumb. It's like, well, hold on, what does a jug salesman do in this society? Like that kind of thing. Like maybe you have a mission where you now have to help the jug salesman or whatever. So like I said, I don't have as much DM experience, but I try to practice that kind of stuff along the way, even just through listening or being a player.
Yeah, and a really good example of having to pivot very fast mid-session. I had a module. I use modules a lot in my DMing. I had a module that I had incorporated into my long game because it was very puzzle oriented, and my players love puzzles. And I didn't realize quite how chaotic, leaning towards evil this module was until we were mid-session. And I went, oh, my players are not going to like anything about this. I need to, on the fly, rewrite this, just make up something. Okay, this character that I know is supposed to die at the end of the module is now going to be a secret informant, and she is a spy who's spying on this evil potion seller, and she is going to help them. And I just completely turned how the module was going to go because I knew it wasn't what my players wanted. So
that seems like a superpower as someone who doesn't have a ton of GM experience, but
it was hard. It was so hard. Oh
my goodness. I really like this. Someone just said in the chat, Dare Rob Freeze, I think. I like the suggestion of one tropes, 2 part stereotype, 1 part surprise. Like for example, 1 old, 2 pipe smoking beekeeper, or pipe smoking beekeeper with 3 a love for weaving carpets. That is like I'm just gonna say that is like some of the best NPC. That's how you make your characters. That's how you should make your
2 to 1 trope. That's great.
I was just, you go.
Okay.
You go.
I had thought about this earlier, but if you feel uncomfortable with playing something that is really new or unique or far away from your original personality, and you do want to center it on a trope, what I find too is that the longer that you play within that trope and get comfortable in that character, then you come up with new ways to kind of, like this person is saying, like subvert the trope in interesting ways. So it's totally fine to live in a completely tropey character and just use that as a guide. And then as you settle into it, you're like, oh, well, maybe this weird cowboy actually really likes gardening, and so maybe, you know, he uses his cowboy skills to steal seeds from every town that he, like, you know, weird things like that. But
I love that.
just settling into the tropes of a character can then give you like a springboard for finding new interesting things about them.
Yeah.
Philippa, I kind of
yeah,
you there.
I was just going to say, I've been reading a new game came out recently called Wander Home by J Dragon. Recommend it to everyone, it's amazing, but it's very narrative heavy, and one of the things it does is you can play it GMless, which we might talk about a bit more later, but one of the things it does is it has the NPCs are called Kith, and they all have 2 traits, and then you write down something about them. But like the actual setup of it is very similar to what we've been talking about here, which is like pick these 2 traits. They can always do a certain thing, like a motto or a mantra, and then pick something that's interesting about them. And so like if you use something like that, and there's other games where they have backgrounds and things, you can bring that in, is to basically randomly roll and then try and like justify if there is that big difference. And the more you practice that, it can be super fun to then, that helps you practice those weird sort of dissonant ones, or like if it's something you're not used to. So again, it's like a roll table, but in this case, it's like kind of giving a bit more direction. So yeah, I think that's another way you can kind of do it. It's just, again, like just practice writing some cool characters and see what happens.
I think, oh, Anna, did you have something to say?
No, we're good.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think I want to say this because I don't know if she's watching this stream right now, but one of my favorite characters ever made that is I can easily see being made in this like way. One of my friends, my best friend, is playing a character in a campaign I'm in. It's like, you know, hardened old wizard, like hardened old wizard, like almost like a dropout, kind of like family misfit, black sheep in the family, and then her thing is like her family were beekeepers and she ran away because she didn't want to do that anymore. They weren't making any money and she wants money. And so like that is such an interesting character concept that like I feel like you can only get after like, because it's actually coming on a year of us making, like, sitting down and talking about the character and how she was going to do it, and she wrote the backstory like randomly like the night before, and that is like, I'm not saying don't write your backstory the night before you play a game, like please don't, your DM will not enjoy that, but it's definitely one of those things where when you have that kind of like 2-1 kind of scenario and you have that fun characteristic and thing that makes your character special, or not even special, but just different and fun for you to play, like it just brings out so much in the game, and makes it, I don't know, it just makes it all fun. Even if you're like doing improv stuff, you improv your character and that can be enough for you, you know?
Yeah,
I just thought of another thing I do sometimes that is a fun thing you can do by yourself. Have people used fantasynamegenerator.com?
all the time.
So if you go on the bandit name generator, it is the best one because there's this like old tooth golden eye McDuggins and stuff like that. And I actually made a character based off a name on there, Tiffany Whispers. But what I do is I'll just go through and I'll be like, name, cool, what's this character? Oh, Blossom the outlaw weasel, okay. And like you just go through and be like, okay, name, and like that's another fun one, is just think of a cool name and then be like, okay, I've got to make something of this, and yeah, set a timer or, you know, impose a time limit and just be like, what could this do? But yeah, that's a fun afternoon.
Yeah, and yeah, and with that beautiful weasel bandit,
Weasel bandit.
I just love it so much. I think that we've got a little bit of time, but we're going to be taking a break for how long? 10 minutes? 5 minutes? 5 minutes?
I'm not sure.
5-minute break.
According to our behind the scenes.
Oh, yeah, definitely during the break, go find that bandit name generator and just like, I don't know if we'll do anything with them, but I do want to see some funky names. So drop them in the chat if you do actually go to
Absolutely.
that. Pick a fun name and pick your 3 adjectives like we've been talking about.
Yeah, and then we have to act out a full scene with all these. No.
I kind of love that.
I won't put that on everyone.
But yeah, we will see everyone in 5 minutes.
Yeah. See you soon.
Perfect.
Mhm. Awesome. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining again. And thanks to Lexi for sort of headlining that first section and getting the questions out there. I'm going to take over for the second half. We'll see how well I do. So, but this has been great. And again, if anyone has questions, if they're just joining, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll answer your questions as we go along. So we've kind of gone over the basics of improv, how to incorporate improv and performance when you're playing, both as a player and as a DM, stuff you can practice in preparation for that. And so I wanted to open it up to everyone here. What is the most memorable or notable thing you can recall ever improvising or performing in the course of one of your gaming sessions? It can be the funniest, the most ridiculous. I know Anna had touched on one of just completely making something up in the middle of a campaign, but yeah, anything like that. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think one time I had to do it, and if any of my players are watching, they'll be like, okay, well, I had brought my players. I'm running a D&D 5e, but it's modern, set in Washington, like a enchanted forest in Washington. So it's a mixture of humans and the Humblewood, like supplement essentially. So a bunch of like forest folk characters mixed in with humans that live in this forest, and they got to one of the towns, and everyone's super busy. And I kind of talked big about like City Hall, like they needed to go to City Hall and basically get the document saying they could stay in the forest, essentially. And they get inside, they talk to this deer who is like, you know, the concierge. She's very like kind of southern accent, just very much, you know, bless your little heart, you know, that whole thing. They talk to her, and they're like, we want to get a ticket to go in and talk to the governor, right, or just whoever I had in power at the time. And they get a ticket, and their ticket wait, they notice that everyone's been waiting for days. And so one of the players is like, who is a mom, her son is lost in this forest. She walks over to one of the people, and she like has been quiet pretty much this entire time. She looked at me and said, who all is like leaning up against the wall? And I like had to quick be like, I don't know, there's like a mom with a pillow, and she's like asleep, laying on the ground, like has been waiting for some time, and a few other people. She's like, I'm gonna go up to this woman and I'm gonna steal a ticket from her ticket from her. Like, oh my God. What is the sleight of hand? Like, what is the perception of a mom? And I was like, okay, it's super high. Like, I had to come up with. So she tried to steal, and she rolled like, I can't remember if she rolled really well or not. I know I rolled like a natural 20 or something. So the mom immediately like grabbed her hand, and I had to like role play this mom being like, why did you take my ticket? And like go through the whole thing. And then they owed this mom like their, you know, service in order to see. It was a whole thing. But it just was like one of those moments where I was like, I was not expecting the quiet mom of the group to be like, I'm gonna go over to this woman and steal from her. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? Like, why? So I feel like that was one of the main, pretty much a lot of things in that scene I had to improv. But that main interaction with the mom and like the two of them almost getting into combat, like that was kind of like mom bat. It's mom. Like that was like
Genius.
Oh yeah, it was wild. I was losing my mind. But yeah, that's probably one of the most notable times I've had to improv.
That's fantastic. Philippa, how about you? Do you have anything
I'm trying
particularly?
to, I mean, I have a lot of funny bits. I'm just trying to think if there's any that stand out. One that I really liked was, so I was running a Glitter Hearts game, which is like magical anime girl transforming heroes type thing. And we were doing our first session, and I was like, okay, you'll get to class, and where do you sit? And then someone was like, I sit next to Smelly Simon. And I was like, cool. Okay. And then I was like, right, I have to just make up who this guy is. And Smelly Simon ended up on the group chat that was supposed to be the magical hero group chat, and like involved in their school project, and just basically has become we're still playing it, has become a very integral part of the game. And I'm like, Smelly Simon is probably going to have to like be in mortal peril at some point now. And he was just, he was made up by a player in the spur of the moment, and I had to go with it. So that's one of my favorite DMing ones.
Simon.
Yeah.
Wait,
I think my favorite
character sheet for him yet?
No, Glitter House doesn't really need one,
okay.
No, he's more of a, I've written down, he likes trains, he likes sending gifts on the group chat, and he's working very hard on his personal hygiene, so it's not his fault that he is smelly. So we've got to give him some sympathy, because I didn't make him, I wouldn't have called him that, but poor guy, it's not his fault. Player wise, like just most interactions I've had in one page like comedy games, because obviously they're designed to be like, I feel kind of bad sometimes going sort of full improv and like full chaos in a campaign, because it can kind of derail stuff. There's big implications, but in a in a one shot, it's like, okay, I am definitely like, I'm pretending to be an alien right now. I'm going to reenact a scene from Grey's Anatomy kissing the hunky doctor to steal his handbag or something. So that happened. But yeah, so most of my fun stuff is probably player side of just being like, yes, I say yes to everything. Every idea that comes in my brain.
Yep.
That's super fun. I recall doing a scene, we were playing Scum and Villainy, which is, if anyone's played Blades in the Dark. Anyway, Scum and Villainy is basically Star Wars, and you're role playing as like scum and thieves in space. And something had happened where an NPC was put in a dangerous situation, and my character chose not to help them in any way. And the consequence of the scene was that they were like mortally wounded. It's this one's not as fun and funky, it's more like heavy, but it transformed into this thing where I was actually the ship's doctor, and we basically collectively, without really setting the stage, we all just sort of played out like a very stereotypical like operating floor scene, like clear, everybody step back, and it's like don't you die on me, like that kind of thing. But in the moment, it was like really heavy, like I had literal tears come to my eyes, and we all just kind of, after this character had passed away, this NPC that before the session no one had cared about, we were all like really emotionally like, wow, that was heavy, but it was beautiful at the same time. And I think it kind of touches back on like not being afraid of tropes, because we had the framework of what happens in a medical drama. We all just kind of
Maximum perception.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to like make
slippers, no.
a mom dungeon, like
The mumgeon.
I think said the internet was out. I'm not sure if it's back yet or not, but we'll see. We'll give it a couple seconds. It's back. Okay, perfect.
Oh, okay. I would say something in aligns with like what you were saying about the scene and how it like emotionally grabbed you. I think that that's something that when tabletop RPGs in general have that special concept, have that special gift of being able to hit home with scenes like that. I've been recently reading more about like safety tools and also just psychological philosophical concepts when it relates to tabletop RPGs. And one of the things that I found, and I need to find the art, like the person who said, the author who said this, but it's called Bleed, which is essentially where in character emotions and beliefs and like different things will affect you outside of the game. So if you have a sad game, or if you have a session where it's really sad, you might actually leave the session feeling like, whoa, I just played that game, but it like really rocked. Like I can't talk to people for a couple hours. I need to chill. Or even like happiness, like, oh, we defeated the dragon. That was the thing that we wanted to do this entire time. And then you leave feeling so elated. You want to call everyone and be like, like, let me just tell you what happened in the session, but you can't. And I feel like that is something that is like so specific to tabletop games. I'm so happy that games, improv, all of it, like we can all kind of have that impact through gaming like that. I don't know. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, and I think that's important to touch on too. There actually, I believe, is still going to be a session in the future on this stream about setting up safety tools and boundaries and such, which is really important if you're gonna incorporate improv, because it can be unpredictable and emotionally heightened, and things just build off of each other very quickly. It's always really good to check in as a player, as a GM, like make sure that everyone's boundaries are respected. And also, even if you do think you're having fun and you're playing out a scene, like just calling it a timeout, checking in on everyone. After playing through like the same campaign, you know, we're all playing villains and thieves and killers and murderers, kind of. So like, you know, bad stuff happens, and just stopping and being like, is everyone okay with continuing to do this kind of thing? Is everyone comfortable here? Is also very helpful, so that if you then go ahead with another improv scene, everyone is at least on the same page that way. So
I think, sorry to carry on that very, very quickly, but like that's another thing is like, I think when you're watching improv, it's like, wow, they're making it all up on the spot. It's so amazing. Like, you know, they're literally making everything up. Like, actually, there's a lot of tools that we've been talking about. Like, you can prep beforehand, as you say. You can set up like, okay, we're not going to include this, or like this person doesn't like this thing. So by setting it up beforehand, it lets you create in that space much more safely. And like, I think that actually does relate to improv and to games. So like, yeah, I think yes and doesn't mean yes and all of the time if it makes you uncomfortable. So yes and has to include everyone at the table. So you know, you can't get yes and don't yes and someone into something they don't like, basically. Is the caveat.
And a very good example of that for me as a player. So I did the Scream campaign on Hoard of Tales in German for Halloween. And before we even set up, because it's kind of like I don't watch horror movies at all, I can't do them, but it's kind of like a spoof on horror tropes. So we established beforehand the tropes that we could not do, like the things that made us uncomfortable. And so that made it so that we all had a much better role play experience, because we knew from the offset what things wouldn't be included, and then everything else kind of formed from there.
Sorry, go ahead, Lexi.
Oh, I was just gonna say, we talked about this. The book RPG Gameplay Guide by James D'Amato. So he has a really cool section on the importance of no. So it's really cool. He's got a whole chapter dedicated to making choices important. And like, to be honest, that's all improv is like a game where your choices are important. And you make a scene out of it. And he goes over what yes is, what and is, which is cool because we already did this. But he talks about the importance of no. And something that he says is like, folks just learning improv or only familiarizing themselves with the basics treat yes and as an inflexible guide. Doing this puts performers at risk by limiting their ability to set boundaries. And so accepting and building on ideas doesn't come naturally in most people. We often reject ideas subconsciously. So if you're trying to learn a skill, it's easy to moralize setbacks and failures. Moralizing all forms of denial as antithetical to progress leads some folks to believe improv shouldn't have any boundaries or limitations at all. It makes people afraid of no as a word, which is ridiculous. So he kind of uses the example of like a character being given like a potion of, or like a vial of poison or something. You as a character, if you are not comfortable with that, or you don't always have to say yes and I drink it, right? Like you're sitting there like, I know it's going to kill me, I know it's poison, why am I doing this? Or
Yeah.
even if it's just
Well, you
improv
could-
from another character.
Yeah, so like you could accept it by being like, I accept the fiction, I'm yes-anding that it's poison, I'm gonna pour it out.
Yeah, like
Because I
toss
know
it.
it's poison, I'm not gonna drink that, throw it on the floor, smash it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's definitely one of those things where this is a little bit off of the question that you said, but I think that the safety tools, setting boundaries, that's important in all of D&D in general, and not D&D, I keep saying D&D, tabletop RPGs in general. Those groups that you see coming up with things off the top of their head, they have gone over I would hope that they've gone over their boundaries and they know how to play with each other within those boundaries, and putting limitations on yourself anyway just like blooms with creativity. So I don't know, take with that what you will, but you don't have to yes and every single thing.
And I think too, you mentioned putting limitations on yourself, and it in a way to keep in mind like you as an improv player playing respectfully and not, I mean, I've been at tables where people don't necessarily have this level of self-reflection, but going back to character motivations and character dynamics can help you make choices that make sense and are justified. So if you are a character and your choice in the moment is, I really want to annoy this person. Well, taking it a step further and going, well, why do I want to annoy this person? Do I want to annoy this person because I, as a player, want to annoy the table? Or do I, as a character, want to annoy them because it'll distract them and my team can, or, I want to make this person uncomfortable. Well, do I, as a player, want to make this person uncomfortable as a player, or does my character want to make them uncomfortable for a justified reason? And if you can keep that in mind at the table, as in addition to setting up boundaries and limitations and such at the beginning, it can help you in the moment to sort of prevent you from like putting your foot in your mouth too much by just making like a really off the cuff or inappropriate or uncomfortable remark for no good reason kind of thing. Yeah, I find that's a good distinction to make.
Absolutely.
We had someone kind of touch on this in the chat, I believe, but and we kind of mentioned this off the top, but what systems or games do you all find are good for providing opportunities to perform, to improvise, to practice these skills that we've been talking about?
For example? Well, I don't play many systems. That's the thing. So like I've done D&D 5e and Firefly and Scream, and that's it. So that's my scope of role-playing games so far.
Are there types of campaign or encounter that you find maybe lend themselves to more performance that you've played through within those systems?
Come back to me. I'm going to think about it.
Yeah, no problem.
Pick me.
Yeah, Philippa, go.
So, I think we were talking before about one-page games. So Honey High, Scope Crashers, Lasers and Feelings, all of that stuff are set up specifically to encourage you to improvise, including the GM, because it'll have like roll tables to design your game at the beginning. And then I think I mentioned this before, but like by playing it as a one-off game, it really encourages it, because at the end, like the stakes are slightly less and it's a slightly more like silly concept normally. So if you're wanting to practice that, like that's a super fun environment to play in, because it's telling you to improvise a bit more.
Totally.
But I would also say, like, in terms of you saying like sort of situations, like probably ones where there's a lot of like, where it's not a cut and dried answer. So like stuff where maybe you need to convince someone of something, or solving a puzzle can be super fun as a player to improvise in, because as a GM you don't have to set what the actual answer to the riddle puzzle is. And then eventually you just are like, yes, that was the correct one. So like just setting up more open-ended things, I think, allow for a little bit more improvisation in general, I would say.
One example I did think of actually. So one thing that I incorporated into my long game. I forget the name of the series, but there's a series of travel modules that are on DM's Guild, and it's like another road or something like this, but they have one that is you go down this road and you find a witch, and she offers to take you along the witch way. And if you accept it, you have to complete a whole bunch of riddles. And if you succeed, then you end up on the other end, wherever you needed to go. And it's been like however long you've been in that which way. And so it was really, really useful because it made it so that my players could play with whatever the weird puzzle was that they had going on. Like there was one where there were red caps and they were smashing pumpkins, and they needed to figure out how to move on. And all they had to go by was the red cap smashing pumpkins, and they would see the players point at a free pumpkin and say something like face, or just 2 words. And so they had to work together and figure out how to solve the riddle. And there were more riddles further along as they went.
Fun. So an open-ended offer, sometimes that's called in like long form or improv in general, but an offer is like, yeah, you put something on the table and then you give people the free reign to just play with it. Lexi, did you have any systems or games in mind that, or encounters, etc.?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I agree with Philippa. Definitely those one-page games are super good for that. I think anything where, and I think this might have already been said, but anything where you're relying more on scenes and story than mechanics that kind of like, I think that just automatically is like programmed in for more storytelling and more improv and more because it's instead of it being, oh, what charisma do I have, or like how good am I at sleight of hand and stealthing around, it's like, no, I'm gonna do it, and I have to figure out how my character would do it, especially because it's not about a stat, it's about just whatever the dice land, right? And then how you react to how the dice land, rather than it being like, oh, this score helps me. Or even having a higher part of the score means that I get to play my character like she's really good at stealthing around. Like sometimes you're just a bear or like a honey badger and roll really crappily, and you gotta like, figure your way around because you messed up. And I really like those I like anything where it's more based on scenes and it's about the story. And even in the introduction of the game, it says this is just get together with your friends and tell a story, over it being like roll the dice and build up your character sheet and spend all this time on your character sheet and a bunch of math.
100%.
I think someone mentioned in the chat fiasco, which I think we were chatting about before screen about fiasco as well, which is a great one for that. But also any sort of system that encourages like you to describe the move or the thing you're going to do first, and then you choose the action, as opposed to going, I'm going to do an investigation check, or I'm going to do a clash move, or whatever. You say like, I'm going to attack and do this and this and this, and describing it more, I think like just playing in that way encourages more of the improv and getting into the zone, basically. So more narrative heavy stuff in general.
Totally.
Jenna, you have lots of things as well, don't you?
Oh, well, I was gonna, because I know 2 of the people in the chat who have both said fiasco, and I know I've mentioned it before, but to anyone who is unfamiliar with fiasco, and there's a few more mechanics that I'm skipping over, but essentially you're all playing as a character, and at the top of the session, you determine a relationship that you have with both of the other characters, and a shared object or need or location. So if I'm playing with Philippa and Lexi, maybe you're my assistant, and Philippa, you're my taxi driver. I don't know, and that makes me like a lady in a court or something, and we each share a location. So Lexi, you and I share an office, and maybe Philippa, you and I share the taxi when we're there together. And then you would come up with a relationship and a shared thing between yourself. Anyways, that's the basic setup. And then the gameplay is just scenes using those small tidbits. So again, you kind of build a framework and you play scenes based on that. And the fate of your character is determined on what kind of happens during those scenes. Like I said, I'm kind of skipping over a lot of it. But if people really want an opportunity for a game that's like really literally just about improving and creating characters and dynamics, Fiasco can't say enough about it. So that's my 2 cents on there. But
So interesting. Oh, I was
sorry,
just gonna say, so interesting. I have been trying to find ways to bring improv and things like that, like relationships and that like shared connection to D&D. And it's like, obviously, I think everyone's always like, oh, well, there's other than D&D, or like either people are totally diehard for D&D or they're like, please, like, try something else. And I'm trying to like be in the middle where I like want the mixture. And so I think like the key to that is probably just playing all of these systems and then, you know, coming to my game and being like, okay, well, I know something that I do is like, usually I'm like, you guys know each other. I don't know. Figure it out. If I do that before a game, then doing kind of just what you said, like there is nothing wrong with being like, okay, you two pick a relationship, like pick something that you both are after, because then I think that just gives, you can write your plot as a DM, you know, and have it have nothing to do with what the characters choose. But if they start off knowing each other and having something they value, they start off being able to have conversations about that thing, whether it's in secret or in front of each other. They can have it be the goal of the party to help them get that. And then they have to make the choice, okay, well, what do we do after this? Do we owe them? Do we, you know, I don't know. It's just, it's very interesting that that's like such a good midway.
Well, speaking of stealing mercilessly from different systems for other games, like I do that with all of these sorts of stuff, is stealing all that setup, as you say, Lexi. And the one I steal that I use now in every game is from Monster Hearts by Avery Alder, which is like teen monsters at school. But it says for the GM, it's like, okay, you're going to go around, you're going to set up connections, and it sort of gives you a prompt for your first one. And then it just says, ask really difficult questions, like ask the difficult question, the hard question of the players. So it's like, okay, so you two used to go out, why did you break up? You know, or like, you know, if it's adventurous, it's like, okay, so why don't you trust this person anymore? Like, what went wrong in your relationship in the past? And like, ask that sort of thing is like, oh, like, and I steal that for everything now. I'm just like, yes, I'm gonna ask the hard question. Yeah, building that together is good.
I
like
love that.
Comments in the chat, Frankenstein's TTRPG.
Yeah.
100%.
Just
Yes,
take
exactly.
and grab and smash it all together.
D&D is not D&D anymore. It's like gonna be D&D Hearts Fiasco.
Yeah, Flames of the Dark Clocks in there somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm just going through the questions. I don't know. Again, if anyone wants to toss questions in the chat, by all means. I kind of wanted to circle back. It kind of touches on like safety tools and boundaries and stuff, but incorporating, because sometimes an improv performance will be humorous and entertaining. Like it's fun to make things fun. And maybe we can chat a little bit about how you can do that, tools for making something engaging, and then maybe also, you know, things to keep in mind so that you're not taking the joke to a place that's punching down or making people uncomfortable. If anyone has any thoughts on that. Yeah.
So it's like, how do we incorporate humor into the game without it being, is that what you just said?
I mean, tools for, no, not at all. I mean, I maybe didn't phrase the question that well, but like if you want to incorporate fun and humor and stuff into a performance, and so you're not just going through the motions of a scene, what are tools to help players and DMs do that, but then also, you know, things to keep in mind so that you're all kind of playing on the same page.
I have
Go
a
ahead.
useful tip from my mentor, or one of many. He is a wonderful chap, Ben McPherson on Twitter. Check him out. He is hilarious. But he told me about 4 years ago, and he said, if you aim for humor and fall flat, you get nothing. But if you aim for drama and fall flat, you get comedy. And so you shouldn't really be aiming to be funny, because if everyone thinks you're trying to be funny, you're probably like, when someone does a really bad pun or a bad joke and you're just like, ugh. But if someone is trying to be dramatic and it comes off a little bit silly, then that's the humor in it. So that's like the top tip I have, is if you're trying to incorporate that stuff, is go big, go for those dramatic scenes, and then step back and be like, it's kind of funny, isn't it? We're all sitting around a table and like talking about it.
Yeah.
Like there's a bit, for example, in Dimension 20, they do a season all about being candy people, crown of candy. And at one point, there's a very dramatic moment. I won't say what it is, but the GM Brennan sits back and he's like, so this is taking place between an ice cream and a stick of licorice. That's fun. And it just like brings the humor back into what was a very tense, dramatic scene. And that's kind of what I mean there, is like, yeah, so aim for your drama and then bring in those weird twists, and then it'll become humorous as well, is my main thing.
I love that. Yeah.
I think about the tone of the game too. I think if you, as a player, I try to look for things that my DM has incorporated that I can take advantage of for jokes, rather than it just being like, pulling it out of nowhere, or pulling on something that like a player and I might have been talking about before the game that like, oh, like now I'm bringing it in because it was really funny when we talked about it, but nobody else has any idea what's going on. Like, I don't know, like even conversations that happen at the table outside of the game, I think I would rather go for in-game elements of like, I'm gonna go over it, like if I was doing like Crown of Candy or something like that, and I have not seen all the Crown of Candy yet, but just like going with the flow here of improving. Like if I was just like, I'm gonna go over to that ice cream cone, I'm gonna look him in the eye and tell him, sucker, like you better stop. Get away from my stuff. Like that's funny because I made it very clear. Like he has set up the world and I'm pulling on his thing and putting that dramatic, like, get away from my stuff kind of thing. And that's like, there's no, like, I don't know, I'm laughing as I do it. I have to stop. I have to tell myself not to laugh. But it is that, like, go for drama, fall short, and you will. I really like that tip.
Yeah, that's what I've used ever since, and I'm like, I don't need anything else, really. Like, it's great.
Nope.
I remember this one shot that I ran. I'm really bad at remembering names of things, but my players had this really tense moment. They were in the Feywild, trying to sneak by some hags, I think it was. And so one person was hovering, another person rolled really well on stealth, and another one was like clinging on like a monkey onto the one who was hovering back. And so the one who rolled really well on stealth was like dragging the other two along. And so I let them set up all of their things that they were doing to stealth by this Glen. And then I said, okay, so just to get the picture of what is happening here. And we got the full visual, and I forget what race they were. I think one was a gnome or something, but the entire thing was hysterical when I had us take a step back and just see what it is they were doing. And that was just a really funny moment that I want to get the details down because I want to commission someone to draw it.
Yeah, sometimes just pointing out what your players have decided to do is humor in and of itself. I love that kind of stuff when you realize just what weird stuff you've created.
I think also this is where tropes come back. We keep talking about tropes. We keep coming back to it. I think finding out what is funny, like when you are watching movies and you're like, what is so funny about this nerdy character? Like, the nerdy character can run around and talk and do whatever, but like the moments where you find yourself laughing, or the crowd audience laughs, whatever, try to pinpoint what is funny about that. Or like cowboys, and like I think of cowboys specifically, but I think of if you're in a scene where you're about to, like it's hard for me to not be vague, but like imagine if your cowboy was just like saying like, over and over and over, the town ain't big enough for the two of us. And at first it's like really dramatic, right? Like you're just looking at someone else and saying the town ain't, and then the next thing it's like, oh, well, the bartender slides you over a shot, and it's like you look down at the shot and you go, this town ain't big enough for the two of us, and you go for it. Like that's something that was dramatic and a trope, and something that trope very heavily leans into. And for you to be like, oh, I'm doing the exact opposite, or like I'm using that trope, but I'm gonna just like go somewhere else. Like that's absolutely a good way to like bring humor to something that already exists.
And that brings to mind something that I've picked up from long form improv is when you are trying to create a sustained narrative, and it's not even necessarily funny, but there's something called the game of the scene. And it's basically a pattern of behavior between any two players. And if you can isolate that pattern, it almost becomes a little trope within your game. So if you're playing a character who is trying really hard to convince another character that they need to put their sword in their holster and not put it in their belt or something, that can become a funny game. Like there's this pattern of behavior, and it's like, no, you put the sword, a holster. It's not a holster for a sword. It's a sheath or it's like, put your sword in your sheath. It's like, what, you mean on my back? No, in your sheath. What, in my pants? What? And then carry that forward. And this person is now eating in a diner. It's like, no, put the food in your mouth. It's like, down my pants? Put the food in your mouth. Like, and so you isolate these little bits. If your players and your GM find something funny, just transplant it, like bring it back. And it creates this like totally go-to trope that you have come up with in your own game that can be hilarious time and time again. I remember we were playing a campaign where there was this character, and it was again like a minor NPC who then became the fiance of my character, who was just this like really dim-witted, like he kind of talked like this, and like the funny thing about him was that he was so unbothered by literally anything. It's like you could tell him that you had just murdered 3 people, and he was like, oh well, that's gonna be a lot of paperwork, or like whatever. And so like the humor was just the fact that this guy had a thing and he stuck to it no matter what the situation was. Anyway, so yeah, I guess the little pin for that one is like find something that's funny and then just use it over and over again. Like it's usually pretty funny.
Also with that, another thing I think this is helpful for adding humor and also like being careful about how you're playing with others, is a really useful tool is active listening. Now, how does one active listen? Like, is that not just listening, but like trying to pay attention to what everyone is saying rather than trying to think what you're trying to say, I think is very useful here. And not just being like, okay, well, my character's going to do something funny now, and it's not really relevant to what's going on. So my point is basically like a lot of this stuff you don't want to do too much, because if you do it too many times, it's not going to be funny anymore, basically. Like you can get a bit worn out. So like just kind of keep checking in with everyone else and make sure they actually want you to do something funny, or like if someone else is being a bit quiet, being like, what do you think, and choose the time and the place. I think is a useful tip for kind of making sure everyone at the table is having a good time.
Totally. Actually we had talked about this before, but I think maybe we will, because we've kind of gone through our questions, and again, if anyone has questions in the meantime, toss them in the chat. But we might actually do, I don't know, like a demo or a game here, just showing how you can kind of use these improv skills. And it doesn't have to be something that you could do this before you start your game. You can do this in your own time to practice your own skills and stuff. But improv is kind of a muscle. If you exercise it, it's easier to kind of slip in and out and find those moments. So I don't know if we wanted to, there's the story game where we can construct one at the same time, or I did like Philippa's idea of describing a thing and creating a world. I don't know if people have strong feelings about one or the other.
I'm wondering if we should do word association first, because it's the easiest to warm us up, and then then try one of the harder ones.
Sure. So this
maybe chat could give us a suggestion in a moment. In a moment when we tell you what to ask us.
Yeah, so we'll do a word association, an A to C word association it's called. So you're taking a starter word and you're thinking of an association, but then you're thinking of another one and you're kind of skipping over that middle association. So you're generating ideas that are inspired by the same thing, but provide more maybe variety and creativity. This is really good to just, you can even practice it on your own in your house. So yeah, I don't know. Does anyone have a word to that they want us to riff off of?
Like a noun.
Yeah, tell us a nice noun. Nothing too difficult. I was once performing and my mother was in the audience and I asked for a noun and she loudly shouted the word womb. And I ignored her completely because
Douglas
like, this is not where this is
Douglas
going
fir.
today.
Someone said Douglas fir in the chat and I love it. Lexi, do you want to start with the Douglas fir?
Yeah,
Lexi?
so are we doing this in a round?
Yeah, let's go Lexi, Anna, Philippa, and then we'll come back to me.
Okay. Okay, so just Douglas fir?
Yeah.
Sure.
Cruella de Vil.
Oh, geez.
I'm not going to explain how I got to
No, don't explain.
Hungry.
Caterpillar.
Branch.
Jungle.
New York. Did you get my reference?
Meryl Streep.
High-heeled shoes.
I literally, in my mind was thinking high heels. Okay, administrator. That's such a bad.
Oh, you're fine. Train station.
X gonna give it to you. I can't explain how I get there. It's something to do with Thomas the Tank Engine.
I'm gonna say time travel, and then I'm gonna grab that.
I
and
hope
maybe
there was one person who like started, like tuned in right there, like just started.
no idea. So yeah,
So,
to the
take all
audience
those and make a game now. Yeah, go. No.
Yeah, so we got Cruella de Vil, we've got New York City, time travel. We've just generated this whole lot of ideas. But I know that it to the viewing audience maybe seemed like we were just saying random things. So maybe we want to give a peek behind the curtain and we'll do the A, B, C association to show how you can skip from one thing to another. And this is a really good exercise for if you're playing in a scene. And yeah, or just trying to come up with a creative thing. It builds on the creativity in maybe an unexpected or like takes it one step further kind of way. So let's take the second suggestion, which is potato. And Lexi, you'll start again, but reveal your inner linking to your word association.
Okay, so potato, baked potato, sour cream.
Excellent.
Sour cream. Barbecue. Bathroom. Because sour cream just not.
Yeah.
So bathroom, beachside decorations, Victorian skinny dipping.
Oh my God. Victorian skinny dipping, Coney Island, Disneyland. So
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, again, you can kind of see like that's a word association, but if you throw in a little middle part, it adds some more creativity. So we've gone from potato to Disneyland. That's pretty far, but you know, maybe you can combine those. Maybe there's Potato Land, and that's where you set your new your new campaign.
And it's a steampunk Victoriana setting. Yeah.
And it's a steampunk Victoria, yeah.
Disney
Ye
has
old
copyrighted potatoes. They've done what they always wanted to do, and they copyrighted potatoes.
Ooh, see, yeah, and or Mine, yeah, would be like you're in one of those old-timey Victorian factories where there's no safety equipment and it's just a factory that makes French fries. And you are, the factory comes alive and you have to battle the living potato French fry making machinery.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Love it.
But yeah, you can see how this works to start
Yeah.
world building or in your game.
Yeah, did we we've got 10 minutes left. So I don't know, we could maybe end off with did we want to wrap up or do we want to finish off with like that little object building exercise or
yeah. So do you want me to explain it?
Yeah, go ahead, Philippa. You're more familiar.
Oh, I'm probably going to mess this up, but we'll see. So the idea is that you start with an object and we're going to describe it in loads of like descriptive detail. We start with like, oh, I remember it now. I described it wrong before when we were practicing it. It's this is to start with. So we'll start with the example of a lemon. This is a lemon. This is yellow. It is bitter. It is pockmarked. It's old. Once you describe that, then you go to the next layer, which is I am, which is like describing sort of how it's used by other people and stuff. So it's like I'm used in lemonade, I'm used on the beach, I'm used for a good day out, I'm used when I go and visit my grandkids in the summer. And then you zoom out another one, which is sort of the theme. So we are in a time of plenty, you know, we are experiencing an abundance of crops and things. And so what this does as a world building tool is fun because you can kind of start real close and zoom out. So chat, what we need from you is an adjective and we need a place because we're going to describe this as a world building place. So throw us some adjectives and some places, please. Hopefully we'll get those through in a second. And yeah, we will start by describing the place itself, then the people, and then the themes of the place.
Fiery. Someone says fiery. Someone says hyperbolic and wholesome. These are all very good.
Very fun.
What about a couple
Give us some places.
Yeah.
Silly.
Dance floor. Oh, I like a fiery dance floor.
I like that.
Very wild. Nice.
Very wild. Hyperbolic garage. Oh, these are all very good.
Yeah,
Philippa,
you can see we're getting ideas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Do we want a modern or a like a fantasy one?
Let's go modern.
Modern.
Yeah,
Cool. Okay. Let's pick dance floor and someone else pick our adjective. Lexi, pick our adjective.
Silly.
Silly dance floor. Okay. So we start. Should we go in the same order? So yeah, I can start and then we'll go back to this original order. So it is a silly dance floor, and then we're going to describe it.
Okay. It is. Oh gosh, it's harder than I thought.
Yeah, it can just be one little bit.
Yeah, it is brightly colored.
Mm-hmm.
It is heavily used.
It is filled with puppies.
It's a little bit smelly.
It's very sweaty.
It's hoping to be mopped soon. Can you mop a dance? Okay, yeah, you can.
Yeah. Oh, geez. It is very old.
Oh, it's me. So I'm going to take the opportunity and we're going to zoom out. So it's a sort of sweaty, puppy-filled, old, brightly coloured, full of music dance floor. So now we're talking about like I am. So I'm a place where you come to de-stress with the puppies.
I am a shadow of my former glory.
I am the pride and joy of my puppy dog overlords.
I am the biggest attraction in my town.
I am, once a year, the convention setter for the puppy overlords.
I am seemingly the only operating business left.
I am flooded with zombies when there are not puppies dancing around.
I am built next to a graveyard.
I'm 2 tiers, so the zombies can dance in the basement straight from the graveyard and the puppies are on top.
Did we want to move on to the we?
Yes, yeah, we are. So we're talking about like local people, we're talking about the theme of the thing, we're talking about general story stuff.
Okay. We are frustrated because the puppies shut down our perfectly legitimate non-colorful dance business.
We are trying to keep away from the puppy zombie conflict as possible. We're trying to keep far away.
We are Ooh, this is hard now.
It's hard.
It's hard. We are
It can be metaphorical as well.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't have to be specific at this point.
We are not equipped to take care of this conflict on our own.
We're pretty sure we might have accidentally started the zombie apocalypse, but we're not telling anyone.
We are a team who attempted to get this apocalypse under control and were shut down by the puppies.
Okay.
We are the puppies, and we will not give up our dancing space. We refuse to yield.
We will lick everyone who tries to stop us.
And we will set the zombies on everyone else. Okay.
Yeah.
I think we should stop there. There we go.
That was so much fun.
So watch out for our one shot with zombie puppies coming to
Zombie
DMs
puppy
soon.
dance floor. Yeah.
Yeah. But there you go. There's a very silly version of that game that you can use to build your own scenes.
But even how silly it gets, you can always kind of rein it back. Like it would actually be interesting to set
there was some
something
cool stuff there.
Yeah, in a town where there's only one business and every other business that comes in fails, or that, you can always pluck things out. That's the fun thing about improv is even if you generate a whole lot of weird spaghetti that you throw at the wall, some stuff will stick and it'll actually be like really cool or really entertaining. Great. Well, we've got just a minute or two left here. So thanks everyone who joined this discussion. I had a lot of fun talking about all this stuff and hope it was helpful and interesting for folks and maybe generate some ideas about how you can incorporate improv. I did want to mention that there is another stream similar to this on Saturday the 12th. It's going to be at 8 p.m. Oh gosh, I don't know what CEST, but 2
Central
p.m.
European.
Central European, thank you, Standard Time, and 2 p.m. EST. That's going to be about engaging new players. So we touched on that today, but maybe you can combine your improv with your engagement of new players and become the best DM in the whole world. Yeah, I don't know if there's any last questions or anything, but sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm just seeing our behind the scenes. Caroline is telling us, did people want to raid a different stream? I do not use Twitch reference. I don't really understand what that is, but I understand it's visiting someone else's stream. Caroline, I don't know if you want to tell us more what we're supposed to do. But yeah, otherwise. Ooh.
Oh, there we go.
Yes. Go
so
say hi
Lexi's
to them.
dropped a link in the Twitch stream there if you want to go raid that stream over there.
Tell them to run away from the zombie zombies and
Oh,
the puppies.
Yes.
Lexi,
Run away
Yeah.
from the zombie puppies into another stream.
Okay, if we have like half a minute left, what's the one thing I'm gonna say to take away from this? I'm gonna say improv heaven. Remember improv heaven. Lexi.
Set boundaries so you can play limitlessly with your friends.
Plan out, write down ideas of scenes that your character would do, and then you can establish how that character would react when you're in game.
Steal fun tropes, both for your players and for your narrative, and practice them by yourself, and make your roommates think you're really weird.
Yes.
Woo!
All incredible advice. Thanks again for joining, everyone. Have a good evening or morning or afternoon, wherever you're at.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Bye. Bye. Baby. Okay. It ended. We're good.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.